Hi. Um, for my sex education experience, it was taught to me in the fifth grade. I was split up, girls and boys. For us, they talked about the menstrual cycle and what to expect. They also talked about pregnancy, STDs, the other different diseases that come along with it, like HIV and so on. They taught us abstinence, always to wait.
Sex education for me was pretty much non existent. I went to school in India from grades 5 through 11, and sex is a highly stigmatized topic in Indian communities, so it was never addressed in school due to religious and traditional influence on the education system, nor did I ever get the talk from my parents.
So I received sex education at school. In high school, I think we had a week's worth of sex education where it was focused on STDs, preventing pregnancies, and they pushed that whole abstinence thing on us. But they also told us that if we needed condoms, they always had condoms at the nurse's office, or that we can visit Planned Parenthood. So they at least gave us that option. As far as birth control, they talked a lot about condoms and the pill, but I don't think we ever really talked about any other birth control option.
So, sex ed for me didn't feel that comprehensive. I kind of felt like I learned more on the internet than I did in the classroom. And I feel like we didn't talk a lot about stuff that I think now is really important. On like a social and also just a personal level, like LGBT relationships, consent, the aspects behind sex more than just like the physical act, gender identity stuff that I feel like could have really helped me and a lot of other kids that were kind of trying to figure stuff out.
Sex education itself is the instruction of issues that relates to the human sexuality, like emotional relations and responsibilities, sexual reproduction, and so on. In the United States, sex education is not a federal regulation and is left to individual states to decide how to impart this information. 37 states require that information on abstinence be provided. Out of these states, 11 only require abstinence as a concept in sex education. Maryland is included. When it comes to women abstinence, only education is seen to weigh a little heavier on them, considering the physical consequences in history of social shaming regarding expression of sexuality in women. This approach is ineffective. The pregnancy rate in the U.S. for 15 to 19-year-old girls is at least 4 times higher than other developed nations, and 15 to 19-year-old girls have higher rates of gonorrhea, chlamydia, than any other age group in the U.S. In fact, women are rarely taught the actual mechanics of sex and are more often taught things about the biological process that they experience. This is not to say that sex education is a walk in the park for men either. Often, boys only learn about barrier birth control and do not participate in the birth control decision making with their partners, like IUDs, the pill, and so on. In addition, many of the sex education programs separate boys and girls, and in doing so, excludes boys from learning about women health-related issues. Not only does this create a level of confusion regarding the female body, it also creates a negative understanding of menstruation, which can hinder their relationships with women. Oftentimes, boys are taught to view menstruation as a woman's problem and something to be hidden and controlled. These problems do not often take into account the lack of information of LGBTQ issues that young kids face, like sexual attraction, gender identity, safe sex with the same sex partner, etc. In fact, 7 states currently have laws that specifically require that homosexuality not be portrayed in a positive light in sexual education. These facts all lead to a current system of sex education that negatively impacts all genders and leaves many kids confused about sexuality and how to practice it safely. It also creates a negative culture for sexuality in the U.S. in general, as these kids grow up and put their kids in these sex education systems and this negative ideas about sexuality for a long time. One of the most relevant sociological theories that discuss these issues is feminist theory. The relationship between feminist theory and sexual education is that feminist theory states that children are not born with ideas of sexual behavior and gender identity, but are taught these ideas. Our society has held the belief that teaching sex to children is harmful to them. However, as discussed previously, this is wrong. Comprehensive sex education allows children to make better choices when they grow up and encourage them to explore sexuality in a healthy way. In order to better sex education, we should implement a few key concepts. First, do not separate girls and boys. Having them learn about each other's issues helps to foster understanding in the classroom and in life. Second, teach kids about LGBTQ issues, including children know that it is completely okay to experience and explore different aspects of sex and gender will help them as they grow older. Third, do not focus on abstinence. Multiple studies have shown that abstinence does not work in preventing pregnancy or STDs. Fourth, talk more about the emotional concepts behind sex. Sex education focuses on what sex is, but not on what consent means, or the social and emotional pressure behind sex. Fifth, extend the amount of time sex education goes on for. In the United States, sexual education starts in 5th grade and ends in 9th grade, and it is taught for about a week every year. In contrast, the Netherlands teaches sex education from kindergarten to high school graduation. The results are positive than this form of sex education. Netherlands has higher rates of birth control use and lower STI and pregnancy rates among women. If we focus on making sex education about the health of our children in the future rather than our attitudes in the present, we can help our children and our future.